So as a little supplemental, transphobia. You'll notice that transphobia has been a galvanizing force amongst what seem to be strange bedfellows. Outright Nazis and right-wing organisations have flooded to embrace transphobia as their galvanising force. This is what has suddenly given them new energy. But if you go to a protest, so I was there when that wretched Posey Parker tried turning up in Australia. I was there in the front lines. Yeah, actual card-carrying Sieg Heil Nazis turned up in her support and were embraced. She ran over and threw her arms around them. And when you looked on that side, when you looked at who was over there, it was the weirdest collection of people. Nazis, okay, people from different supposedly Christian groups standing up for decency and, morals, shoulder to shoulder with the Nazis. Zionists with Israeli flags wrapped around them, standing next to Nazis. And there's all of these gender-critical feminists, TERFs, in their lovely white women outfits and their pussy hats, and they're all there. So I'm going to link you to a video. What's this chap's name? Jonathan Duncan. Very articulate gentleman. Very entertaining gentleman, probably way more so than I am, but a point that he made, and that from my own observations of these groups, is that they are not strange bedfellows. They all represent the same project, and that project is essentially white supremacy, is what we are looking at. If you look at Islamophobia, you will find Islamophobia has some remarkably similar roots to what you'll hear in transphobia. It's about protecting women. Islamic men, predators, are wandering the streets looking to seize white women, looking to rape white women, looking to groom white women. The grooming narrative is very important here. Organised gangs. Women are weaponised as a thing in support of a patriarchal society who must protect these women from being seized by the unclean ones of another race. Because women in a Nazi-style project are entirely seen as being women only because of their ability for motherhood, and that's why transgender women are not women in their eyes, because they cannot biologically be mothers, and that is the only function of women, white women, because the white women must be saved from miscegenation. Pure white race must be replicated, and that is the core of a Nazi white supremacy project. You'll see women's rights weaponized by all of these groups. That narrative of the women being protected against predators, you'll see, is exactly what's being used both in Islamophobic projects and transgender ones. How to cast these groups as predatory threats to white womanhood. That whole thing about women's spaces. Right-wing people don't know what women's spaces are. Brief sidebar, so I'm a burlesque dancer, and so when I'm going on stage with the rest of the girls, we all share a change room together. We're all putting on lingerie and putting on knickers, and you have to put each other's pasties on. It's hard to get those things level, okay? We put them on for each other. No one cares because we're all women together. But this kind of innocent use of these spaces is recast by these people as a threat, because the essential role of men in any right-wing project is entirely as protectors. Capitalism, indeed, essentially divides labour into the productive labour, which is defined as male and heroised and has value, and unproductive labour, which is seen as female and essentially is thought to have far lesser value. Female labour is raising children, looking after a house, caregiving, which is why they're allowed to be nurses within that narrative. Doctors, slightly frowned upon, but it still comes under caregiving, but it is not seen as primary work. It is lesser than the true male work, etc. If you have a look at TERF ideology, if you have a look at what's being said, for instance, about how lesbians are being turned into transgender men, a male patriarchy has somehow fooled these young lesbians into trying to become men, and so they are stealing sexual partners away from the true lesbians. It's that same rhetoric turned sort of on its end, where again an outside force has the true women under threat, and those women are entirely sexualized. These are lesbians entirely sexualizing other women into objects. They've objectified them into things to be seized and possessed. They've objectified their own, and you'll find this all through. Now, you'll see a lot of liberal feminism is entirely classist and entirely white. It does not allow the lower classes in, and it don't allow you in if you're not white. And so this whole narrative of saving the women from a predator that is coming in from the outside, a big part of this narrative that you'll hear is that a global elite is somehow forcing transgenderism onto society, a secretive project, an insidious project. To the right wing, a Jewish project, where innocent society is being corrupted by mysterious Jewish figures. But this is the same thing you'll hear from the TERFs and from the, supposedly liberal feminists, that this is being imposed, that a secret deep state is somehow overthrowing society by enforcing this from outside. And that's where you'll get names like George Soros and so on thrown into the whole mix. And it has this very similar anti-Semitic root to it, which is why the Nazis have leapt to embrace what the TERFs are bringing to the table and see themselves as such bedfellows. Now, in colonialism, which is tied up with world liberalism, it has a slightly different lineage to fascism. Fascism's white supremacy project is based on its ideology of a male ethnostate, male supremacy, therefore ruthlessly police gender boundaries, because nothing must weaken the pure male strength of this state, and therefore the women that support it. But liberalism is largely born through colonialism, in which genocidal predation on other cultures is the norm, the absolute norm, and the reduction of those cultures into savagery is also a huge part of it. These people are less white man's burden. You are saving them. Essentially, by shooting them in the heads and nicking their stuff, you are saving them from their corrupt ways of life, which often included these additional perceptions of gender. There's a very powerful thing in colonial cultures, which is one of the terms for is colonial inversion, where the people that you have predated upon and suppressed are very much depicted as being savage and murderous, so that the outsider that has come in, inflicted massacres and genocides galore on these people, are recast as heroic, poor individuals under siege. We must be here on our guard in our enclaves, constantly defending against these unspeakable savages, these vile people. You watch an old 1930s Northwest Frontier movie, you watch any of these, you watch, any Fort Apache style thing, brave white people valiantly holding the line against just the waves of these absolute savages around them. That is the rhetoric that is used to make seem righteous the presence of colonizers attacking the colonized. But this habit goes through to their own gender patrol, because, of course, in those liberal colonial projects, white supremacy is at its core. The race must never be watered down by intermingling with the colonized. You don't allow half castes into normal society. That's unspeakable. And so the supremacy of the white race must be upheld. And through all this you'll see protection of women. We must protect the women from being seized upon, predated upon, raped by these people that would force them into, birthing half castes. It's a very similar project. And that logic you can see rolled over into their transphobia, where transgender societies, which have been so repressed and so under attack, are recast as the predator. Now, trans people who, let's face it, we just running around, we just want to be able to go down the shops without being attacked, is all we want. And as I told you, with my little anecdote about how changing rooms are used, no transgender women are going into changing rooms to stare at women. No transgender people are going into women's toilets with any thought other than taking a pee. But the colonialist mentality of inversion means that it's so easy to recast the oppressed as the oppressor. So now the pure white women must be saved from this predator that is there to insinuate itself within them and water down the purity of true womanhood being entirely defined as your ability to have more white children. It's the same project. It is so similar they are cloned. From different beginnings, Nazism, fascism, colonial liberalism, and its offshoot, which is white classist feminism, have those same roots and essentially have found that transgender hatred can be a galvanizer to give energy to movements that were dying. These groups were dying. Fourth generation feminism was sweeping old white classist racist feminism aside. Nazism, millions of us died to stamp it down. These right-wing and theological projects to destroy people's rights we were sure we had moved beyond them. But by discovering that they can get together with transphobia and promote this in the public eye, it's galvanized them. It brings them recruits because they can communicate with people. Saying, come join the Nazi Party is not going to have much results for a Nazi group. Islamic people are out there trying to rape our women. Now they've got your attention. Come protect our kids from the evil transgenders. Now you've got their attention. Come and protect our women from being attacked by transgender people trying to get into their spaces. Protect your daughters from being magically turned trans. The lie has traction when placed in those terms and allows these groups to recruit. And particularly the liberal transphobia is insinuated all through of our institutions. They're everywhere. Governments, legislations, the way medical departments work, what you have to do to get your name on a license changed, all of it is institutionalized in there and works readily to help with further oppression. The fight for transgender rights is a larger fight. It is not just a fight to make sure that transgender people are not extinguished, because this is the end of all of these projects. Each of them states very clearly the total eradication, by which they mean the death, of transgender people everywhere is their goal. But it's not just that, because these systems that allow the demonization of the oppressed do not just work for us. They work for all people of colour, each of which can be recast as a predator. This is where the American-Mexican border obsession comes from. Same rhetoric, same root. Demonized people who are an oppressed people being changed into a predator, an oppressor. The fight for trans rights is the fight to make sure this does not happen, to dismantle within our institutions these mechanisms that allow you to discriminate between one group or another to give more rights to some and remove the rights from others. It's a wider fight. It is the wider fight for justice and a better world. And that's why it's our moral duty as decent human beings, no matter what your gender or gender presentation is, it's your moral duty to fight against it and engage in that bigger fight of justice for everybody and demonization for none. Demonization is always done because someone thinks they can get something by fooling you. If you are following any of these racist or transphobic rhetorics, you are being preyed upon. And what's sadder, you're being preyed upon willingly.